Proverbs chapter 27, starting in one of the most famous popular Proverbs, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. As iron sharpens iron. You know, I often make reference to Paul Washer's quote that marriage is the most powerful sanctifying tool on earth that God uses. Now, marriage is friendship on steroids. I mean, that's kind of the idea. It should be your most intimate and close friendship that you have on earth. And it's more than friendship, right? But with that, if we allow marriage to have that work in us, what we'll find is that it can be used to transform us, because no matter how perfect your wife is, well, she's not perfect. He's not perfect. They're going to have things about them that don't mesh with you, that don't make your life easy. And oftentimes what I tell people, it's like if you get two rocks and you put them together, and these are any two rocks. And unlike in the wild where rocks are of various types and hardnesses, imagine you have two of the same kind of rock. Maybe one's a little harder than the other, but you just take them and just go, kind of whack them together. I don't know. And you might scrape and scratch them a little bit. And if you do it again and again, some of those initial bigger chunks, they come off kind of by hard wax, you might say. And then eventually, they're going to, because they're so odd shaped, that they're going to be very shaky as you move them back and forth. But over time, they're going to begin to conform to each other. And as you continue scraping and scraping and scraping and scraping and scraping, they begin to become smooth and flat and true. And more, you see that work being done in them. So just as iron sharpens iron, which you have to think, sharpening iron would be an even more difficult process than rocks. Well, that's the idea of how we sharpen each other. Now, we can sharpen each other through exhortation and through support and all these other things, but quite oftentimes it's the trials and the abrasions that are what really transform us. Every trial is an opportunity to respond in the correct way. Every trial is an opportunity for you to exercise patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control. You'll find out if you have the fruit of the Spirit when you are put in situations where you need to exercise the fruit of the Spirit. Along a similar line, it's worth reminding, and we've talked about parenting so much, in the Proverbs, but going back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, one of my favorite little sections of text that is, I don't know why I'm yawning. I've been up for a while, but maybe it's how my body asks for coffee. But in Deuteronomy 6, it starts with the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And it goes on, but then it gets down to the point where it tells the people of Israel that you shall teach these things diligently to your children. But to teach diligently is one word in the Hebrew. Is it chanak? Let's see here. Numbers. I'm sure I have it written in my Bible. No, shanan. It's the word shanan. And in the 11 times, let's see here, it's 9 times in the Old Testament. 7 times it's translated to sharpen. 1 time is actually to pierce. And then only there is it translated to teach diligently. But the idea of sharpening, that's what it is. So when you're teaching your children, once again, it's this process, little by little. And I've done metalworking. I don't know if you guys have done metalworking. I'm looking at the people who are watching right now, and I don't know if you guys have done metalworking, I guess, but I have knives. I had a sword that cracked during the quenching process. So my gladius turned into like a little mini pirate sword is kind of what it looks like now. But I've done this, and you know what? I had power tools, and it took me a long time. I had belt sanders, and it took me a long time. And I just used metal that was already like good. They would take the metal and fold it and pound it and fold it and pound it. I was exhausted with power tools just taking a flat piece and trying to make it the right shape. So all that stuff said, it's the reality that this was a process. And so when you talk about teaching your children diligently, you're sharpening them like a blade. When we talk about iron sharpening iron, and a brother to a brother, and that's all your brothers, a combined effort, which is also why we need to gather with our brothers and sisters, because if we're not gathering with the saints, exhorting each other daily, so much more as you see the day approaching, right? Well, then that sharpening is not going to take place. So we need to be gathering together for this sharpening to happen. But it's just a reminder, it's a slow process. And I guess why I mentioned the metalworking was even because one thing I did learn too is that there's some stuff, if you try and rush it, it just won't turn out as nice. When you try and go at it with the really heavy grits and, really abrasive tactics, a lot of times mistakes and problems happen. And so some things, there's just no quick way to get it done. There's just no fast way to get from the beginning to the finished product. But it's amazing what can happen through a little bit of process over time. Let me stand up for a second, and I'm going to see if I can show a visual representation of what I'm talking about. And I think I know where it is, unless it's been moved. And I'm not seeing it. Oh, no, wait. Maybe. Yes. In the Yuba River in California, as a kid, we were, I was with my dad, and we were gold prospecting. And it was really cool. It was one of the more fun prospecting trips. If you've actually done gold mining and gold prospecting, you understand that typically you're finding dust. That's the norm for the average person, unless they get really, really lucky. But this place had little nuggets. They're tiny, not worth a ton of money, but they were actually big enough that you could reach down and pick one up with your finger or tweezers. And that was pretty cool. That was the only time I ever got to experience that. But in that river, a regular rock had gotten lodged into some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? A crevice? Maybe not more of a crevice, but just, somehow, because I didn't see the before picture. So it got stuck somewhere in a piece of bedrock. So it's the bottom of the riverbed, and it's stuck there in this little concave area, and it began to bounce around. Well, it began to bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce, and who knows how long that rock bounced around in this little thing. But what it ended up doing was actually grinding a round track that's almost donut shaped like the rock. And the rock, which I still have, if you see, turned into a perfect circle. Okay, it's not a perfect circle if you measure it. It's a little bit on the oblong side. But this little rock was just rolling around in circles. And so you could take it, and the rock just perfectly fit into the walls over who knows how long, billions of years. But in the river. So the river is moving it continually. So obviously it could have actually maybe even happened just in one season for all I know, because the river is obviously moving it a lot. But it's just an example of how you take a rock, and this rock was likely shaped like any other random rock, and this hole it fell into probably was just like a regular hole. But as the two got worked together, you began to see them conform and fit so much like a husband and wife. And just like you're trying to conform your children to God's word. But it's a process, and it's a process that takes a long time, and it's a process that most often comes through friction. That's the idea of iron sharpening iron. It's friction which forces the objects to conform. So as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. There you guys go. Just remember, every time someone irritates you, every time you get asked to do something that tries your flesh, it's an opportunity for you to conform to the will of God. God bless you guys. Have a great day.